The woman arrived at the Aldenmore Grand on a Tuesday afternoon in October, and Delia Marsh noticed her the moment she stepped through the brass-framed doors. Delia had been front desk supervisor at the Aldenmore Grand for 4 months. She had learned quickly that this lobby told you everything: the way a guest moved, the way they handled a porter, the way they looked at the room. Some people entered a grand hotel as though they were being granted an audience. This woman walked in the way you walk into a room you have always had the right to enter. No performance. No pause to take in the chandeliers. Just a composed, unhurried step, a single leather bag over one shoulder, and eyes that moved over the space the way an architect's do, measuring without being dazzled. She was perhaps 60, silver-haired, dressed without extravagance. She carried nothing that announced itself. She gave her name at the desk, Eleanor Voss, and Delia checked the booking and felt a small beat of unease she could not yet name. Penthouse suite, 3 nights, confirmed. The reservation was 3 weeks old, cleared by the regional office. Everything in order. Delia handed Mrs. Voss the key card and was about to say something welcoming when the door to the back corridor opened and the general manager, Mr. Gerald Fitch, stepped onto the floor. Gerald Fitch was a man who managed by presence. He was tall, well-dressed, and accustomed to being the most significant person in any room he entered. He had run the Aldenmore Grand for 6 years and took visible pleasure in the hotel's reputation. He also had, Delia had noticed in 4 months, a particular way of looking at certain guests, a fraction of a second assessment that happened before any greeting, and whatever he saw in that assessment determined everything that followed. He looked at Eleanor Voss now. He looked at the leather bag. He looked at the coat, which was plain and good but not showy. He looked, Delia believed, and made his calculation. "Are you checking in?" he asked, pleasantly enough. "I have," Mrs. Voss said. "Thank you." She took her key card from Delia's hand. Fitch's eyes moved to the number on the card's sleeve. Something shifted in his expression, a tightening, a reassessment that he did not try especially hard to hide. "Ms." He glanced at the screen. Delia had swiveled away from him. "I'm sorry, there's been an administrative mix-up." He said it with the smoothness of long practice, the kind of tone that made an error sound like a courtesy. "The penthouse suite has been committed through our corporate relations office for a reserved guest. I'm going to have the team move your luggage to one of our superior rooms on the 9th floor. They are exceptional, I assure you, and will make this entirely right for you." Mrs. Voss looked at him without blinking. "I don't believe there's been a mix-up," she said. "The booking was confirmed 3 weeks ago." "I understand, and I apologize for the confusion." He was already signaling to the porter near the elevator bank, the small motion of a man accustomed to the machinery of a hotel moving on his behalf. "The penthouse is reserved for guests of standing with the Aldenmore Group. We will, of course, ensure your room is complimentary for the duration." Delia watched Eleanor Voss take that in. She watched her look at the porter, who had stepped forward and was waiting. She watched her look at Fitch. And Delia saw, in that moment, what composure actually was: not patience, not resignation, not the careful stillness of someone working out how to argue. It was the composure of a person who already knows how this ends and has decided that raising her voice is simply not worth the air. "I'll wait in the lobby," Mrs. Voss said. "Please don't touch my luggage." Fitch's jaw tightened for a fraction of a second. Then he recovered. "Of course. We'll have this resolved quickly. Marcus," he said to the porter, "please move Mrs. Voss's bag to 914. And Marcus, because Gerald Fitch was his general manager and had been for 6 years, moved toward the bag. Mrs. Voss stepped between Marcus and the bag without urgency. Not aggressively. She simply placed herself there, in the porter's path, and looked at him with the same level expression. Marcus stopped. "I'll wait," she said again. Fitch's smile did not waver, but it stopped reaching his eyes. "Mrs. Voss," he said, "I have to ask you to cooperate with our staff so we can." "I am cooperating," she said. "I'm standing here." She crossed to one of the lobby's high-backed chairs near the fireplace and sat. She did not look at Fitch again. She set her bag beside her, crossed her hands in her lap, and looked at nothing in particular with the stillness of someone who has learned, somewhere in a long life, that the truth does not require her to hurry it along. The lobby was not empty. A couple near the concierge desk had gone quiet. 2 businessmen by the far window had turned. The bellman near the doors was watching with his hands folded. Fitch was aware of them. He said something briefly to the porter, who nodded and retreated, and then he walked away toward his office with the deliberate pace of a man who is not going to be seen rushing. Delia stood at her desk and felt the name on the reservation turning over in her mind. Voss. She had heard that name once before, in her second week at the Aldermore Grand, in a staff briefing about the Aldermore Group's regional portfolio, a summary of the properties and a note about the holding structure. She had not thought much of it then. Now she thought of it. She pulled up the reservation file and looked at the address on the account. She thought about the way the regional office had flagged this booking, not flagged it as a problem, flagged it the way they flagged the bookings they watched closely. She thought about Eleanor Voss sitting in the chair near the fireplace, hands folded, waiting without a word of complaint or a single raised voice, and Delia made a decision. She picked up the internal line and called the regional office directly. Not the front line number. The direct line for the VP of Operations, whose card was in the supervisor's binder under the tab that read, "Use when something is wrong and you are not sure what." The VP's name was Howard Aldous. He answered on the second ring, which was unusual for a Tuesday afternoon. "Mr. Aldous," Delia said, keeping her voice low and level, "this is Delia Marsh, front desk supervisor at the Aldermore Grand. I have a guest named Eleanor Voss here. Our general manager has directed her removed from the penthouse suite she booked and asked her to wait in the lobby. I wanted to make sure there's nothing I've missed on our end before I..." Aldous said, "Say that name again." Delia said it again. There was a silence of about 4 seconds. "Do not let anyone move her luggage," Aldous said. "Don't let Fitch do anything else. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He was there in 19. Delia had watched the lobby during those 19 minutes the way she imagined a weather observer watches a sky, not panicked, but very attentive. Mrs. Voss had not moved. She had accepted a glass of water from a passing floor attendant with a nod of thanks and set it on the table beside her. Once, she glanced at her watch. Otherwise she was still. Fitch had reappeared twice, once to say something low and firm to the porter, once to look across the lobby at his guest in the chair and then look away. He had the manner, Delia thought, of a man who was waiting for the situation to resolve itself in the direction he had already decided. Howard Aldous walked through the brass-framed doors at 3:47 in the afternoon, and he was not alone. He had a woman from the regional legal office at his side and a printed document in his hand, 2 pages, folded once. He was a compact man in his 50s, direct, unhurried. He looked at Delia first, and she nodded toward the chair by the fireplace. He crossed the lobby and stopped in front of Eleanor Voss. "Mrs. Voss," he said, "I'm Howard Aldous. I apologize for what's happened today. I should have been reachable before it came to this." Mrs. Voss looked up at him. "I appreciate you coming," she said. Aldous turned and looked for Fitch, who had appeared at the edge of the floor when the doors opened and now stood very still near the corridor entrance. "Mr. Fitch," Aldous said, and his voice carried without effort across the lobby's quiet, "please come here." Fitch crossed the floor. He had the look, Delia thought, of a man who has begun revising his assessment of a situation too late. He was still composed, still professional, but something underneath the composure had gone uncertain. Aldous unfolded the 2 pages and held them flat. "I have the ownership registry for the Aldermore Group. I want you to see this clearly." He did not hand the pages to Fitch. He held them at reading distance, facing him. Eleanor Voss. Majority interest, 54%, transferred via estate settlement 14 months ago. Her name is on the deed of this property, Mr. Fitch. Her name is on the deed of every property in this portfolio. The lobby was completely silent. Fitch looked at the pages. He looked at the name. He looked at Eleanor Voss, who was watching him with the same level expression she had worn for the better part of an hour, not triumphant, not cold, just clear. The look of a person who has nothing to prove because the proof is already in someone else's hand. Fitch said. He stopped. "You directed a guest to be removed from a suite she owns, on this property," Aldous said. "You moved to have her luggage relocated and told her the suite was reserved for guests of standing." He said the last 3 words with a careful neutrality that was its own verdict. "I'm placing you on administrative suspension effective immediately, pending a full HR review. You'll surrender your master key to Delia Marsh at the front desk before you leave this floor. Fitch looked for something to say. He did not find it. Aldous continued. You'll also, before you do that, issue Mrs. Voss a formal written apology. I have the form, it goes into the hotel's permanent guest record. He produced a single sheet from the woman beside him, and held out a pen. There was a long moment. Then Fitch took the pen. He wrote. He signed. He handed the sheet back without looking up. Aldous passed it to Eleanor Voss, who read it without hurry, folded it, and placed it in her coat pocket. Thank you, she said, to Fitch, without irony, without anger, without any trace of the satisfaction that most of the room was feeling on her behalf. Fitch walked to the front desk. He set his master key on the counter in front of Delia and held her gaze for a moment as if he might say something. He did not. He walked to the corridor and was gone. Aldous turned to Delia. Please have the penthouse suite fully prepared for Mrs. Voss. Anything she requires for the duration of her stay comes to my desk personally. He looked back at the lobby, at the couple near the concierge desk, the two businessmen, the bellman at the doors, all of them watching with the quiet attention of people who understand they have just seen something they will not forget. Thank you for calling me, he said to Delia. Yes, sir, she said. He moved aside to speak with Mrs. Voss privately, and Delia stood at her desk and breathed. The porter, Marcus, appeared beside her. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't know. Neither did I, Delia said. Not for certain. You knew enough, he said. She thought about that. She thought about Eleanor Voss sitting in the chair near the fireplace for 19 minutes, not fuming, not demanding, not performing outrage for an audience. She thought about the way the woman had set her bag down, crossed her hands, and simply waited. As if she had understood, in some deep and unflustered part of herself, that the truth did not need her help. That it would arrive when it arrived. The porter moved off to prepare the luggage cart for the penthouse elevator. Delia watched Mrs. Voss stand, accept a brief word from Aldous, and then walk toward the elevator bank, the same unhurried step she'd come in with, nothing added, nothing performed. She pressed the call button and turned slightly to wait. For a moment their eyes met across the lobby. Mrs. Voss gave a small nod. Not a thank you, exactly. More like an acknowledgement, the nod of someone who recognizes another person for what they did. Delia nodded back. The elevator arrived. The doors opened. Eleanor Voss stepped in, her bag at her side, and the doors closed on a woman composed and whole, going to the floor that had been hers all along. Delia stood at her desk and looked at the master key on the counter and then at the lobby, the couple returning to their conversation, the businessmen glancing away, the afternoon light slanting through the tall windows onto the marble floor. For months on the job, she had learned that a grand hotel was, more than anything, a place that told the truth about people, whether they wanted it to or not. It told you who a person was not in the moments when everything went smoothly, but in the moments when it didn't, in the small, pressured window when they were told they were wrong and their next move was entirely their own. She thought about Gerald Fitch and the calculation she had watched him make in 1 second over the top of a key card sleeve. She thought about Eleanor Voss and the choice she had made, to say almost nothing, to sit, to wait, to trust that the facts were sufficient. She did not think they were the same kind of people. She filed the HR incident report before 4 o'clock, as the manual required, in plain and complete language. She noted the time of each event. She noted what she had seen and what she had done. She signed it. Then she went back to work.